Hello, welcome to the inaugural edition of County Board Wrap-Up. I'm Mary Curtis from the Office of Communications. We're really excited about this project. Each month, following the county board meetings, we're going to take a half hour to talk about, well, what just happened and what exactly all of this talk means for you, your family, and your community. And we really hope that this gives us another great communication tool for letting you know what our county government is doing and why. Joining me to make everything perfectly clear today is our current board chair, Mary Hynes. Mary was elected to the county board in 2007 and is holding the gavel of board chair for the second time this year. Mary, thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to be with us and explain how the county board works.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Mary, and as excited as you guys are.
Well, I thought we would first start with some of the basics. First of all, why does the county board have public meetings?
Well, you know, we're elected to do the public's business, and so we need to do it in a way that the public can see and participate in.
And how often are you required to meet, or is it up to you how often you meet?
Oh, I think the schedule is pretty much up to us, but Arlington has a long-standing tradition of meeting on Saturdays, and we now meet the following Tuesday as well. We found that those 2 days work for us to do the business well. It allows people who have jobs to come in Saturday morning and tell us what they think. It also allows us to split some of our more complicated work over 2 days that are close together.
So it's actually one meeting a month held over 2 days?
That's right. That's exactly right.
And you divided up what happens on Saturday that's different from what happens on Tuesday?
Great question. So we start Saturday mornings at 8:30 with public comment. And anybody who has a concern that's not on our regular agenda can come in and talk to us about it. People get 2 minutes to tell us what they think. We listen to that, and then we tend to kind of dispose of those things after we hear the public comment. Then we move into consent. These are items that there's pretty much general agreement on, and we tend to vote on them all in a block. But board members or members of the public who have concerns can contact the board, and we'll pull something off if we think it needs more conversation. Then we move to regular hearing items. But those consent items, they come back on Tuesday evening starting at 6:30, when then the public can comment on them directly to us before we take them up.
Now, you mentioned the agenda. A couple of questions about the agenda. First question, who sets the agenda? How do you decide what's going to be heard at a given meeting?
Well, the ultimate control of the agenda resides with the chairman of the board. But there's a lot of work that lots of people do to get something ready for the agenda. So obviously our county staff spend a lot of time making sure everything's right, our county attorney. But on many of the large planning activities, we also have community engagement as something rolls up to be ready for the board. And our commissions often provide us with advice on items coming to the board as well. So as chair, I'm kind of looking, are all those ducks in a row? Does it look like it's ready? And then I'm agreeing to the scheduling of it.
And is there any kind of informal conversation among board members before these things actually come to the public hearing?
You know, sometimes we will have a work session on a topic. A good example is our housing study, where we'll have a work session on the 23rd, and then we'll bring it back in probably May or June after there's community comment. Board members have some knowledge of what's kind of in the pipeline, and there are interim briefings for board members on really complex subjects. But whether we're actually negotiating, that doesn't happen too much. It's really the chairman's call.
Okay, and the other question I had about agendas is if you want to know what's going to be at the board meeting, do you have a chance to know that before the board meeting actually happens?
Yeah, so about a week before the board meeting, we post the public agenda. It's sometimes in planning speak, I guess is how I would describe it. And so we've started recently, with your assistance, a new tool for the public that puts out in kind of layman's language what's being decided. And people can sign up for that online, and we've been getting a lot of good feedback from folks that it tells them what's of interest to sort of the general public.
One more question I had about people being able to bring something before the board and speak to the board. To do that, do you have to let the board know in advance that you want to speak on a particular issue?
No, you actually don't. You can show up the day of the meeting. You can fill out a speaker slip. and give it to the clerk, and people get called kind of in the order that they present them. The one caveat there is we only hear one speaker per topic at our public comment on Saturday morning. So if 5 people come in and they all want to talk about parks, we're only going to take one. And we ask them to kind of work that out among themselves.
Oh, I see.
And sometimes people will say, if you agree with me, stand up. And that works too. But we're not going to take 15 people all talking about the same topic, because we need to get to the regular business for the people who've come for the regular hearing items.
Well, and I wanted to go back to those regular hearing items. Site plans.
Yep.
I think a lot of people wonder, first of all, what is a site plan, as opposed to what we call in bureaucratic speak a by right development. And I wondered if you would address that, and if you would explain what happens between when the developer puts in his initial application for a site plan and when it finally comes to the county board.
Sure. And let's take one step back even further and remember that Arlington is well known for our long-range planning. So site plans have to fit into the long-range plan that's already been adopted by the board. And that's one of the guiding principles, really, is we don't only talk about a place when somebody comes with an idea. We have a pre-created community idea of what we want there. So that's an important first step. A by right development in Virginia, every piece of property has some rules around it about where a building might be placed, so the setbacks, and about the heights and densities that are allowed. If the owner of that property wants to do exactly what's allowed within that box, or even a little bit less, they can do that simply by coming in and getting their building permits from the county. If, however, particularly in commercial areas, the owner wants to do more, then they look at our long-range plan and they say, oh, what did the county imagine could be here? They think about what they want to do, and then they enter what's called the site plan process, which is where we look at what they want to do. Really, staff starts this conversation, not the board. The staff looks at what they want to do, looks at our plan, and says, well, you're close here, you're off there, gives them a bunch of feedback. Often they'll go back and redo, and then come back to the manager and her staff. When the manager and her staff decide it's close enough, then they accept the site plan application, and it enters the more public, community-driven process that our Planning Commission runs, called the Site Plan Review Committee, SPRC for short. The SPRC has neighbors on it. It has commission members from other commissions, and they basically scrub that plan, trying to make great places that comport with our vision, that are buildable, and that deliver value to the owner in a way that fits with what the community wants.
And when all this is said and done, how long does it take? Are we talking weeks, months, years?
In general, at least months, and there are some that do go on for years, particularly ones that are really complex, or where we didn't have a really refined plan and there are more things in play. Parking, how much open space, how high is too high, how dense is too dense. When those kinds of things are still being talked about in the SPRC, it can take a long time.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for telling us about all this. I think it was really informative and very helpful to people. We're going to take a short break. If you have more questions about how board meetings work, email them here at arlingtontv@arlingtonva.us. or tweet them with the hashtag CountyBoardWrap, and we'll try to answer them next time. When we come back, we'll talk about what happened at the March County Board meeting.
Anywhere you drive in Arlington, you'll encounter county work crews who are outperforming daily tasks like cleaning streets, collecting leaves, or plowing snow. Driving safely around these vehicles is extremely important to avoid accidents or injuries. Trucks do not have the same stop-and-go capability as cars, therefore, here are some safety tips our Department of Environmental Services would like you to remember. Please slow down around work zones and provide county vehicles and personnel additional space needed to safely operate. Trucks have blind spots between the doors and the rear of the vehicle. Stay out of these areas to ensure you are seen. Do not pull in front of a truck when you need to stop or slow down. Be sure to signal your intentions and do not make moves abruptly. When parking, be sure to park as close to the curb as possible. Most importantly, practice patience. Be a pal, predictable, alert, and lawful, and don't zone out. Finally, if you encounter unsafe behaviors from a county truck driver, report it to our risk management office at 703-228-4444.
Welcome back. Now that we've talked about some of the basics, let's get to the March meeting specifically. Our topic, first of all, Mary, is going to be this exciting new redevelopment in the courthouse area. What can you tell us about this site plan that the board approved?
Well, you know, it was 8 years in the making, Mary. As I mentioned before, when we have our long-range plans, then the owners have a better sense of what they might do on their site. So over the last 8 years, Wells Fargo and the owner of the Wendy's site have been negotiating. They're finally together, and they've come in with a proposal for a 12-story, small floor plate office building. That's really quite exciting.
Well, this is a big change, 12 stories.
Yes.
So what went into developing this site plan and bringing it to the board?
So there's a lot of really kind of interesting values-driven pieces to this particular one. The long-range plan anticipated some more height here, but it's a little higher than the plan anticipated because just down the hill, just down Courthouse Road, down by Route 50, part of what this site plan does is preserve 3 jewels of historic garden apartments that were designed by a guy named Mizrobian, who's got an international reputation. So the extra density that could have gone on that site has been moved up to the Wendy's site. So we're locking in those low-hanging buildings, those beautiful old buildings. No more development's going to happen there. They're preserved forever, which is cool and wonderful. So some of the height comes from moving density up the hill to a place that's a block from the metro. So multimodal matters a lot here. We're getting a new bike lane, redesign of the streets, and we always think about the traffic and the parking impacts when we do these kinds of things. And this one employs a new policy that allows some reduction in commercial parking in return for investment in other multimodal moves. And so that's happening here.
And what can you tell us about this particular intersection? This is kind of a special place in
You're
Courthouse,
absolutely
isn't it?
right. Yeah, and the plan called for iconic architecture. And if you look behind us, you can see that it's kind of a triangle site, and it's got this great line that cuts through and makes for an iconic place. And also creates a covered plaza below that we think will be terrific for people.
Is that a public plaza?
Yes, it's going to be a public plaza. It has what's called an easement over it, so we don't own it, we don't have to maintain it, but the public has full access.
Wow, that's fantastic.
It is, yeah.
And you mentioned earlier a term that I think some people don't really know, multimodal. What does that mean?
Well, in Arlington, we think about transit, we think about cars, we think about walkers, and we think about bicycles. And particularly the closer you get to our metro stops, the more those modes all converge, and we have people using all of them to get around. So when we look at these sites, we think about all those different ways that people get around, and we try to plan for them. We do that with these traffic analyses and other kinds of studies to make sure we're making good choices.
So when you say a traffic analysis, I mean, people will look at this and say, wow, a 12-story office building in the heart of Courthouse. Courthouse is pretty busy. How do we know how this will impact traffic in that area?
You know, this is one of these funny little moments because it's a drive-through. It's a fast food drive-through and a bank drive-through right now. It has a tremendous amount of car traffic on this site. So we hire professionals whose job it is to model what might happen based on the way usage patterns work in other parts in the county, and they apply that knowledge to this new site and to the building that's anticipated. In this particular case, they actually think we'll see fewer cars because there's no more drive-throughs.
Really?
Yeah.
So you can actually replace it with a 12-story office building and perhaps have traffic be even less.
Be a little bit less. Not tons, but a little bit, yeah.
And there was a new parking, we have a different parking formula for this?
We do. We've been watching commercial parking throughout the county in our dense areas. And if you go back and look at some of the buildings built in the 80s, they're only using about 2/3 of the parking that was built. And parking is driven by ratios that the board adopts. So about a year and a half ago, following a year's worth of work by a citizen task force and with business representation, we came up with a formula that said, if you want to build less parking in a commercial building, we're okay with that, but you have to make an additional contribution into transit infrastructure.
Oh, interesting.
And so we're using that model this time. So they're building slightly less parking, but they're making some contributions that will help us do things to support Metro and ART buses in the courthouse region area moving forward.
And how important do you think this project is to the overall transformation that is going on at Courthouse? There are some other things going on at Courthouse
There
as well,
certainly
right?
are some other things going on. This one is likely to happen fairly soon because they've been working so long on the site acquisition. We asked them at the board meeting. They said they thought they might be breaking ground within a year or so.
Wow.
They got to come in and get all their permits and do all that technical work. But the Summers block, which many know where the COSI is next to the Metro, is under one ownership at this point, except for the building that the county owns. And they're working on a site plan that would be pretty significant. And we've also been engaged in envisioning a different kind of courthouse over the long run. And so that's all in play too. But yeah, the idea that Courthouse would move to really becoming an iconic government center surrounded by iconic buildings is on the move in a way that it hasn't been for quite some time.
Well, that's a really exciting development.
Yeah.
Now, to go from, I guess, the sublime to what some would consider the mundane, you went from a site plan to approving a new powers for the county manager to determine a process for some parking citations. Why is this important, and why did the board decide you needed a new process for this?
Well, you know, we have been sort of watching how difficult it has become for people who have compliance tickets to actually deal with them once they get into compliance. So compliance ticket is your license, your little tags on your license plate have expired and you forgot to go get them, or you don't have your county sticker or your inspection. All of those things are about kind of safety, and when we give tickets, we want people to come into compliance. And we're actually not very interested in the ticket revenue, except for people who are real scofflaws. But there hasn't been a way that made sense for people to come in and show they're in compliance and get the ticket taken care of, which is really what we want. In fact, we had a 6-month backlog because people had to get a court date, and the courts only hear these once a month for 1 day a month. So it was really a problem. So in last year's budget, we asked the Commonwealth's attorney, the treasurer, our police department, and the courts folks to kind of work together to come up with a solution. And after quite a bit of study, we discovered that the best strategy was to give the manager the ability to designate some agency in the government that could do away with these tickets. We're in the process of figuring out how to implement this. It won't go into effect until July 1st, but we're still working through who's going to do it, and then we'll change all the paperwork, and people will be able to do it. The good news is we heard yesterday from the courts that they have added more days between now and the end of June to try to deal with the backlog.
Oh, well, that's good.
So hopefully we'll start with a much cleaner slate July 1st.
And going forward from July 1st, the idea is it's going to be easier for people to take care of these tickets.
It should be a simple come to the courthouse, show that you've paid the DMV or the treasurer's office, and be able to get the ticket taken care of.
Great. Well, thank you. We're going to take another short break and be right back to talk about more highlights from the county board meeting.
Does anyone else in Arlington love to hang glide?
I wonder what's going on this weekend. I need to meet new people.
I need to find a vet for my new puppy.
Put your thoughts into action and join the conversation.
We're back continuing our discussion of March's County Board meeting with our guest, current Board Chair Mary Hynes. Hi, Mary. Let's talk about Carlin Woods, Mary Carlin Woods in Bluemont Park. The board gave a name to a piece of a park the other day. Why would you name a piece of a park?
Well, you know, the renaming of this area of the park, or the naming of this area of the park, came about because of an unfortunate accident. A citizen was walking in the park, fell, broke her hip, and when they called 911, the fire trucks were unable in this very large park to get to the right part of the park in a speedy manner. So the Bluemont Civic Association kind of understood what had happened and said, you know, we should probably rename some sections of the park and re-sign them in an effort to improve safety. And so they looked around, and people may not know this, but on the east side of Carlin Spring Road, near Route 50, is the original log cabin with some additions that the Carlin family lived in beginning in 1772.
Oh my goodness.
Carlin Spring Road is named after a spring that was on their property. And Mary Carlin, the last of the Carlins, lived in that house until 1905. So Bluemont Civic Association picked up on that history and said, let's name these woods, which are right across Carlin Spring, after Mary Carlin. And they made that suggestion to the board. It went to a bunch of commissions. Everybody thought it was a great idea. Our public, our first responders thought it was a good idea too, and so the recommendation ultimately made its way to the board. So now we've got a better naming system going on for this section, and we're celebrating our history, all in one fell swoop.
Well, and what's really cool about this story is that this was actually generated by the citizens. The
Absolutely.
citizens thought of this idea and were able to bring it to the board.
Right. We do have a naming policy, and so if other people have ideas like that, check it out. One of our rules is that the person does have to be dead for 5 years.
Oh.
So it's a nice way to celebrate people who've made contributions or families who've made significant contributions to the county story.
Well, the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which I think might have been the first time the board has done this, correct me if I'm wrong, you honored transportation champions, business champions for transportation?
I think maybe this was the second year.
Okay.
And the first year was only business. This year we've added multifamily properties as well. These are organizations who've decided to encourage through strategies people to use modes other than their cars.
Okay.
So let me make clear that, you know, our goal is not to eliminate cars in Arlington County. Our goal is to give people options so that they can make good choices about how they get around and are not forced to use their car if they don't wish to. So these organizations and locations have thought strategically about how to encourage people to use their options. One business gives people a little differential if they locate within 5 miles of their headquarters in an effort to reduce people's travel time and actually improve their quality of life.
Now, how do you become a transportation partner or champion?
Well, you can become a transportation partner by collaborating with our Arlington County Commuter Services, ACCS, or Arlington Transportation Partners, both of which work with businesses and multifamily. And then there's kind of a menu of things that you can look at as an organization and say, hey, we do this, 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 and this. The people we honored, the 7 businesses we honored, they're at the platinum level. So they are our top achievers, and they're the innovators, quite honestly. They're doing things that aren't on the list.
Oh, okay.
And we think that that's a great way to showcase where this could go with innovation and good ideas from the community.
Well, this is a great program, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you're hoping other businesses follow the suit of the platinum
I
leaders.
think they told us they'd had 120% growth from last year to this year.
wow.
So,
Oh, that's
so yeah, I think
fantastic.
people are joining and seeing the advantage of being a champion.
Well, and finally, just to wrap up this conversation, I'd like to have you explain to us a little bit about where we're at with Long Bridge Park. And what happened with Long Bridge Park and the aquatics facility at this board meeting?
Sure. Well, a little bit of history. People may remember that we got bids in 2013, late 2013, 2014, to build the aquatic center that were just way more than we had expected. And so we paused the project. We put it on hold. We said, we can't go forward. Then we understood that there might be a regional Olympics bid, and they were somewhat interested in our site as the aquatics place. So we said, okay, we'll go into that bid, we'll see what happens. As everybody knows, DC didn't get the bid, Boston did. So now the question is, what's our game plan? And you know, a lot has changed since that building was designed. The economy has changed, many things in the region are different. So what we did on Tuesday was direct the manager to go back, work with our citizen group. We've had a Longbridge Park Planning Committee for many, many years to re-examine the assumptions that we used about what the facility should be, to look at what our needs are, if they're the same or if they're different, to understand what dollars we have available. We have some authority that the voters gave us. It's not been sold yet, but we do have some. And think about what we might do here in the future to serve the community. So they're going to spend between now and January 2016 sort of looking at it, developing recommendations, and they'll return to the board next January with thoughts about where we go next.
So there is a timeline here.
Absolutely.
And when you say return to the board, will the board at that point make a decision about how to move forward?
Well, it'll be up to the board then what they want to do. There'll probably be a presentation of the recommendations. There might be a work session. The board might decide they want to have some more community process, some broader community process around it, or they may decide they're ready to make a decision. Ultimately, my guess is some piece of it will roll into the next county capital improvement program, which would be adopted probably in the June-July timeframe in 2016.
Do you personally think it's possible that we will be able to build some sort of a swimming facility in Longbridge Park? And I guess we should make that clear to our viewers that what we're talking about here is Longbridge Park and Crystal City.
That's exactly right. Well, you know, I think that ultimately we're going to see some kind of a community recreational facility. Whether it has all of the components that were initially imagined, whether we end up with a more simplified kind of a swimming arena. You know, there's a lot of support in the community for more lanes. My husband's a daily swimmer at Washington Lee. He tells me it's crowded, and I'm hearing that from other people too. So I think we need more lanes. Having a 50-meter pool would be a great thing to add. But how that would all fit, you know, we're pinched on gym space.
Yes.
We're pinched on indoor soccer space.
Yes.
We could use another indoor walking path like we have at Jefferson. So what should go in there to meet the community's needs over the next 20 years? That's a really big question, given what's happened in our local economy. So I'm sure that this group of people will vet those various ideas, put together a program, hopefully that's affordable to the community, and then come on back and have that broader conversation with the board next January, February.
Well, that's all we have time for this time. Mary, I want to really thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, both about how county board meetings work and what happened at the March County Board meeting.
Well, Mary, thanks so much for this idea. I think this is just a great way for us to let the community know what happened.
Yeah, I agree. And we look forward to seeing you back here in April. Thank you.
Can't wait.
Well, that's it for the March Roundup. Thank you for joining us for this very informative chat with County Board Chair Mary Hynes. And please join us next month when we round up the April board meeting, a very important meeting where the board will adopt the fiscal year 2016 budget and set the property tax rate for the calendar year. See you in April. Thanks again, Mary.
Oh, you're welcome.
It was really great.